Okay, so they're laying mineral streets out today, just like they do almost every day. And they do it every day, but just, I mean, over my head. So I'm going to go in here, digital collection of electromagnetic nanocarbon from the area you guys call the clouds. And I'm going to go, I got two filters with me. I'm just going to go with the red filter now. And then red filter. And this is the guy that I met, that I got turned on to the other day. Jeff Buys Cars is the name of his channel. And I'm learning about his story, so I want to share it while we're looking at the, what you call clouds. I'm digitally collecting the electromagnetic nanocarbon. The true creator's work is all there. Feline, canine, rodent, ape, human, and beast. Look at all the triangular shapes everywhere. Yeah, beautiful.
Hello, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another of my interview series. Today I'm very excited because I'm going to be talking with Jeff Buys Cars, Jeff from Jeff Buys Cars, a YouTube channel, fantastic channel, all about cars and more, it seems. Let's talk to Jeff because, hello Jeff, I would like to talk about electric cars because this is the thing we're all supposed to be buying.
We are, yes. They are the future.
And yet, when you look at, if everybody did buy cars, and this is what my viewers keep telling me, hang on a minute, this isn't, how does this work? Because if we all suddenly buy all these electric cars, there's huge amounts of problems with it. It's all been sold as the rosy answer to life, the universe and everything, gets rid of pollution, saves the planet, all that sort of nonsense. And yet, actually, there's a little bit more to do with it. Now, you famously made a video about the Royal Mail, which I believe went quite viral, and you effectively said if they do follow what they said they're going to do and get rid of the fleet and replace it with electric vehicles of a similar sort of size and what have you, it would basically bankrupt them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the concept was 41,500 petrol and diesel vans, the cost of purchasing electric vans to replace them, and whether or not it would be viable. The video was then shared on their own internal platforms, and I'm even told that Mr. Simon Thompson, the chairman of Royal Mail, responded to it himself, which was interesting. But as you say, the problem with the electric car argument is if you take it on its face value of the running costs over a year and the emissions over a year, then they are impossible to beat with any other form of personal transport. However, the electric cars don't exist purely in a vacuum of yearly output and cost. You have many other things that come into that as well, and that really is, whenever I'm making videos about this on my channel, I really want to look at them in the terms of the big picture and not just at those two things that they're sold on.
Right, absolutely. Now, my girlfriend used to drive with her ex a hybrid. So
okay.
The hybrid. Now, I just should say, I'm not a car person. People who watch my channel will probably realise there's certain areas like football I'm not very good at all at, and cars is another thing I'm not very good at. And she will go, that's a nice car, and I will go, I'll take your word for it. She drove this very nice, very comfortable, very large electric hybrid that continually needs to be charged up. And she's told me a little bit about electric cars. And one of the things I understand is that you know, it's cheaper to fill it up at the moment, it seems to be, although we're in this, all the fuel prices is going up. But if you charge your car up and it costs whatever it does, you go on holiday for 2 weeks, the car is not as charged as it was. Whereas if you'd filled it with petrol, the petrol pretty much is still there.
Yeah, and again, a large part of growth on my YouTube channel and social feeds this winter has been with these Tesla charging videos. So a follower of mine sent me a video of the queue of Teslas waiting to charge at T-base services on the edge of the...
Okay, so one of the things he talks about in here is, these guys are talking about, is the 4 cameras that were cut in, I don't know, downtown somewhere, London maybe or something. And 4 of the traffic cameras where the lines were cut. To me, that sounds like something I wouldn't even bite at. That would be useless and nonsensical in today's computer age. And Canadian Prepper was talking earlier about some things that I wanted to also maybe throw into this one. All right, the technology, you have tens of thousands of MIT graduates plus hackers that you could easily hire to go in and do things. I won't even say what, but they could do whatever the hell they want, okay? And to cause problems and cause trouble if they really wanted to knock out cameras that are on the poles. You're not going to do it manually, you know, camera by camera. So you got 4 cameras knocked out of tens of thousands of cameras, because you have to remember that the cameras on the poles are just one part of it, and that's what these guys, even this guy, he's a nice guy, Jeff, nice guy, but he's still missing a lot of different parts of it. He's way behind on it, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, we have the Canadian Preppers on his channel selling camera equipment. This camera equipment is so convenient because you can go on your cell phone from anywhere you are and see what's going on at your home. But that means that anybody who wants to go on your camera equipment and tap into it and see what's going on at home can also do that. Not only you. You can, even if you want to use the enclosed systems that are just only to your house, then you're not going to be able to, if you're turning that on and turning that off from your phone, you do realize that that means that anyone can turn it on and turn it off from wherever they are if they're tapped into your system, which is very easy for these people to do. So you would not go around cutting lines on individual cameras if you were really sabotaging. It sounds set up to me. It sounds made up and set up. And the Canadian Prepper to be selling camera equipment and getting people for a takedown of some kind is really ridiculous, because you're watching yourselves. I'm sorry, you're putting it out there. So every time he's on camera at his house, and he's on his cameras walking around his house, then anyone who's tapped into his camera system can also do that. And if he's not home, they'll know he's not home, because he won't be there in the cameras. So to be selling it as a security device and not talking about all that part of it, which makes it a non-security device, once you realize that you're not the only one using it, you're using it less than they are as far as a security device goes. So I just wanted to mention that. I'm going to mention a few things as these guys are talking, that this guy Jeff, he's a really nice guy. That's why I like him. I like hearing his story. But he's still missing a lot. He's not taking it to the next level either. So maybe they're still missing some parts of it. I don't know. But he's got some of it, and he's got a big following now. And I don't know why he's being fed to us, because he's, you know, he's wondering himself. If you listen to this conversation, he's wondering, why am I now all of a sudden beating the algorithm? Because he's been in such a small channel. He's just a little car guy channel, and now all of a sudden he came out and did these videos about, I'll just let you listen to him.
The Lake District.
Right.
And that's when, for me, I started to see the sort of hypocrisy of this. People were waiting 10, 15 hours to charge their cars. So On the back of that, there's been another big article that was published in, I think, the Times recently. A journalist saying, "I've had enough. My electric car has ruined," I think he said, 2 holidays and 2 Christmases because of problems either with the car or with charging. So again, you go back to what we first opened up with. Yes, they don't emit so much from the tailpipe. Yes, they are technically cheaper to run, but there's a whole load of other stuff that goes along with it. With a hybrid, you're in a kind of a better position because you've got the backup of the petrol engine, but in many cases as well, that petrol engine is compromised, so it might not be the most economical when it's running on petrol, for example. So the idea that you could start your car and run the first 15, 20, 30 miles on electric, that's great. I'm okay with that. But if you're then kicking in a petrol engine, that petrol engine has to be a good one and it has to be economical. The problem we have is a lot of government legislation and taxation is pushing towards these lower emissions vehicles where they don't necessarily work for the people. So if I give you an example, a friend of mine has a company car. He does a lot of driving around the country. Previously, he would have had an old diesel, something like a Vectra, that would have done 60 miles to the gallon. You know, fill it up once, you get miles and miles and miles from your tank. But now, because of the way company car tax works, he has a BMW 330e, which is a hybrid with a petrol engine. So yes, it's great. You know, he can run on electric all the way to the motorway, but he's only getting about 35 miles to the gallon average out of that car overall. So the government is saying it's cheaper for you to have this car. We want you to have this car because it's better for the environment, but it's using twice the amount of fuel. So is it really? It's quite a bizarre situation that we find ourselves in.
So there's a lot of sort of hypocrisy in all of this. I mean, going back to your lake, at the lakes, the service station at the lakes, and people queue for 15 hours. Unless you can budget that time, I don't know how people can operate. If you're trying to go, if you're a representative of a company and you've got lots of calls to do and it means driving a lot and you want to just fill and go like we all do, how do you, what are you going to do? It's like almost, it comes to mind, it's like the old Coach and Horses where you've got to change the horses. I better pick up a different car to do the next part of my, what was that? To do a different part of my journey. And that would be, that is a very backward step.
I agree, and maybe there is something in that. You know, maybe we would be better off having a system where you drive your electric car, you then decant your battery that is discharged and pick up a new battery and carry.
It's just amazing because, there's thousands of trails above our heads right now. No one will look. They'll refuse to look. Matter of fact, they're pissed. I just had someone look out the door at me a little while ago, and they're angry that I'm got a camera aimed up at the clouds. It's like they don't want to know the truth. They don't want to know reality. It's very, very fucked up. And then you're the bad guy for bringing it to them. It's fucking so weird. Okay, the barrier, there's a carbon barrier that they lay out in the sky that when this carbon barrier keeps the moisture and all whatever heavy metals and minerals you want to keep between the ground level and that carbon barrier can be adjusted for what you want to evaporate through it, what you want to seep through the carbon barrier, or what you want to stave down below the carbon barrier. It's all controlled by what you put in that carbon barrier for electromagnetic carbons and whatever you dump out. That's only one aspect of it, but it's a big one because it comes with all these sicknesses and ailments, a lot of them, because the metallists that thrive on LED light, from the nanolith size metallists to nanometallists to the electro and biometallists, they all thrive on the LED lights that we're putting into our eyes and that our sun is being turned into. Already turned into, I'd say, for at least 10, 15 years now, steadily, 10, 15 years. They've got it to the white light now almost all the time, our sun. The sun is no longer yellow the way that it was when we were children. And no one even pays attention to it. So here's these guys, very smart, obviously awakening, but they're trying to warn people about things that have already happened, and then they too, maybe mistakenly, are warning everyone about things that are already in play. And some of it, we only got until You know, that's the funny thing too about him mentioning that he's gaining fame and that the algorithms are letting his videos out there now, that kind of thing, right? And then he's wondering why the algorithms are sending him certain videos and certain people. Why is he all of a sudden catching attention, and he's questioning it as he's going along. And maybe there are reasons for that. Maybe he's being allowed to grab this attention because he's maybe accidentally, directing people in the wrong direction. Because there are many places that he's right about these things, but he's not really looking at the even bigger picture. Why would you send people around to cut cameras, right? If that's what these are, some group who they're going to blame, and probably it'll be a total setup job and a hoax. When they do finally get somebody on it, they'll get them, you know, whatever. Who knows? We'll see what they do. Um, but the point is that, come on, man. I mean, computer hacks could take down thousands of those cameras at a clip, you know, that kind of thing. When we get hit with EMP attacks and stuff, it's not going to be some local kid in his basement, you know, knocking out a couple cameras on his computer or something like that. It's going to not be them. Believe me, it's going to be the same people that are, you know, running the show with these 15-minute cities and all the people you're naming, that Jeff is naming. That's who it'll be to do the big takedowns, and they'll still have access to it all. That's the funny thing, is they got backup batteries, and their equipment will be saved, and you know, then it's just going to get worse from there. Let's listen to some more.
Carry on with that. Maybe it's to do with the infrastructure.
But they're quite big, though, aren't they? Those they're not. They're not like even the size of an ordinary car battery just to get it started.
Well, yeah, and again, that's another one of these things that is never discussed when we're talking about the benefits of electric cars, less emissions and less cost. You have a gigantic battery which has been manufactured, for starters. There's something to do with that, but also the sheer weight of these batteries means that the wear on your tires and your brakes, and let's not forget a lot of the emissions and the
Yeah, and again, he's on top of the batteries. None of this would be economical. You got to redo the streets. He's right about all these things, but yet we keep missing the fact that we've had three-cylinder engines, right? Stay with me on this, everyone. We've had three-cylinder engines in our past, combustible engines that did really well, and they were even more economical than these electric cars that they're putting out. When you look at how many carbons they take per year and that kind of thing when they're driven and stuff like that, and they got good, decent speeds. I can tell you one of them was called a Champ. I don't even remember who the hell made it. It was called a Champ. It was a three-cylinder vehicle. I happen to own one of them, and the gas mileage was unfreaking believable. You could put $5 in it and drive it for 2-3 weeks. It was you know, unbelievable. When I was younger, anyways, I could. It was unbelievable, and it was a strong car and a good car and all. So we made these cars over the years. There are many other examples just like the Champ, and you know, marketing, they get taken out due to bad marketing, or you know, someone with more money took the market and that kind of thing. But they were there then, and they existed. So to come out with the electric cars, that's number one. Number two, when you listen to the amount of weight. Okay, these guys I'm gonna turn them back on. They're gonna talk again, and then when they talk again, keep an eye out for one of the things they talk about was the weight of the vehicles and stuff. But when you go look at, like, let's say Jay Leno's show with cars, Jay Leno points out a lot of electric cars that he had from the 1920s and 30s, and they only took 2 or 3 batteries up into the 50s and 60s. Then bring it up to then, you had some small little pickup trucks. I just seen one drive by the other day. I remember seeing them when I was a kid. In the back of the pickup truck, in the bed, underneath the bed, kind of held like 6 to 9 batteries only. I don't think it took that many, but there was other people that put more batteries in because you could go further. So I've seen them where they fill up the whole back of the bed with them, and you know, then put your plate on top, and you got a nice electric vehicle, and they get around. And these have been around. Now that is a lot lighter than what we're doing today, because today we're trying to carry all the weight that a modern combustible engine would be trying to take with it. But if you go back to the car that Jay Leno was using, the electric car, they didn't take up as much weight. So if you want to go smaller, compact, bring your speed down a little bit, you get more further miles out of it, and they'll run better, and it'll be cooler. So you have to make maybe electric car roads still, because you don't really want those cars fucking around with cars that are doing 75 to 90 miles an hour. They're just going to want to do 30, 30 to 40 miles an hour tops or something like that. They're small electric vehicles. So if we wanted to go back to something like that, we definitely could. I mean, it's all there. This is really good. The imagery is really good. All right, let me put these guys back on. I don't even know what it is. I gotta get my glasses because I can't see.
The bad stuff that's in the air that we breathe in, it doesn't just come from the burning of the fuel. It comes from your tires breaking down, your brakes breaking down. And these heavy electric cars are putting more of that into the atmosphere. So we cannot look at electric cars as the savior of the future purely by looking at the emissions from the tailpipe and the cost of them.
Right, yes. So things like, as you say, cars are going to be heavier, are they? Is that the overall thing, because the batteries are that much heavier?
Well, at the moment in America, they're actually looking at reinforcing the infrastructure of the roads, believe it or not, because obviously in America, they love pickup trucks, they love these great big SUVs, and as these vehicles become electric, they're pushing 3.5 tons. So the people who run the roads in America, whatever they're called, are saying, hang on a minute, can our bridges, can our roads really take the increase in weight for the traffic volume that we have? Which seems bizarre, doesn't it?
Well, so then, if you've got more of these very heavier vehicles running on these very heavy batteries, etc., and the infrastructure suddenly needs to be upgraded, all of that then is a huge amount of work, industrial work, which presumably is going to have its own CO2 carbon footprint related effect on it, that at the moment we don't have that problem.
So if we want to move to EV, we need to improve the road network and the charging network, because we're saving the planet with these cars, and we're also ignoring the fact that the very act of making the electric car produced 80% more harmful stuff in the actual build of it. We've got more harmful stuff being created in the build of the car. We've got more harmful stuff being created in the build of the infrastructure and the backing up of the structures that we have that the cars drive on. So really, any savings and planet-saving kudos that we've got from the vehicle is really dwarfed by everything that's going on around it.
I was sent a very...
It's true, and it's even more so than he says. Okay, I was on the Canadian prepper I was just mentioning just a couple hours ago, and I had to change the channel because, again, these are nice people. They seem like really nice people. But he was selling everybody on those several things, and he's ignoring the mineral streets that are right above his head. He's got minerals every time he's doing in the car. I can see him, the mineral streets going behind his head. The true creator's work is all around him, and he's ignoring it. But that's understandable because we've all been programmed to ignore it. I get that. But now the mineral streets themselves, as far as heavy metals and minerals, aluminum, strontium, barium, lithium oxide, carbons to start with, and that some humans have a global plan, they call it, when really we don't live on a spinning wet pear rocket ball. But anytime you say something like that, like these guys are going to mention in a few minutes, they rank out flat earthers, thinking that flat earthers are the psyop. Flat earth is a psyop, they'll tell you. But they don't recognize that their spinning wet pear rocket ball theory is just as big of a psyop as flat earth. Not any bigger, not any smaller. I keep thinking about that, going back and forth. Is the flat earth psyop less of a psyop because I'm more attracted to the geocentric model myself as a human being? I'm more attracted to the way that it works, so I'm always catching myself saying a falsity myself, because I'll say, well, the geocentric model was closer than the heliocentric model, but not really. They actually work pretty damn close to the same thing. They just give each what they call, I'll just call them the wandering stars, so I don't get myself angry. But the wandering stars, they name them and give them different jobs that they claim that they do and everything. But they're very close to the geocentric model when you really look at it and think about it. Their jobs, you know, of all them things. I'm not even going to name their names. You know what I'm talking about, anyways. If you don't, then don't worry about it. You'll learn about it later. But all right. So back to these guys. So the Canadian prepper, he's on there, and he's talking about gardening and stuff like that, and he wants people to, you know, prep and get ready for something goes bad. Okay, well, if you're not willing to look at the mineral streets that are right above your head, then all the gardening in the fucking world ain't gonna do shit, because they've changed your ultraviolet light. They've changed it over the last 15 years, like I keep saying, because if you noticed yourselves, anybody who's 50 years old or older, you've noticed that the sun is no longer the yellow that it used to be when we were kids. When we were told not, don't look into the sun, before the songs came out about it, we were even told, don't look into the fucking sun, directly into the sun. And then you always try to a little bit and stuff, but the sun was yellow for most times. I barely remember it, rarely remember it ever being white. Not until I got into my 20s, when all of a sudden I turned around and looked again, because I don't think I looked at the sun for a long time or something. It was such a gradual change that it didn't really hit me until all of a sudden I turned around and I'm like, yeah, actually I do remember. Why do I remember the sun always being yellow? And then I started looking at kids' pictures. You know, actually kids even today, to this day, have a habit. Some of them do. If you watch the artwork when my kids were in preschool and stuff, and kindergarten, when they're still innocent and they're not trained, they'll draw the sun as yellow because that's what's in the books that they read, not because it's the sun they see outside, but they'll draw the sun yellow because it's in all the books, and it's in you know, a lot of times they'll show a sunrise or a sunset where it's in a heavy colors of atmosphere, so you'll get different colors gleaming out or whatever, you know. Anyways, back to this. So if the Canadian prepper is not going to realize this, my point is that the changes to the sun, by laying out a certain heavy metals and minerals, you can learn what heavy metals and minerals are doing. They call it geoengineering, is what they call it. It's kind of like the geocities that they want to put you in, and everything's geo. That's what they like to do. So they run you on the heliocentric model, but everything they do in it, they name geo, as in the geocentric model. It's very, very suspicious, very funny to watch it all go down like this. It's crazy. So, anyways, vitamin D. So your body needs the sun, the ultraviolet light from the sun more, and particularly, and anybody that's scientific can go check it out, and I'm sure there's more details than just that. But if you, just to get the gist of it, like I was explaining in other videos, if you think of it as if we're living in a light bulb, if you change the heavy metals and minerals that light up that light bulb, you're going to change it from a mercury vapor to a halogen to an LED to an, you know, you're going to keep changing it by changing up the heavy metals and minerals that are in it. So if you do the same thing to the skies, and they call it sky seeding and all that, if you do the same thing, then you're going to get the same fucking result. You're going to, so if you want your plants to die, then you can put certain lights on them that'll make them die, because they'll be starving for ultraviolet light. If you want the metallus, if you want the biometallus, electrometallus, nanometallus, if you want them to pick up in population because they will kill off other species, and in the same light, you can do that, because there's some species that work well with those lights and some that do not. So if you want certain funguses and molds, let's say, to pick up, that are these certain metallus that that are the mold and funguses that I'm talking about, they actually are them. And but there are only some strains of them. So anyways, there's dust metallus, and that are in the dust, that are the dust, that kind of thing. But anyways, so if you're not paying attention to what I'm showing you in the skies, and no one's watching the mineral streets, nobody fucking cares, because still here's another dude that's a really nice guy, but he's not looking at the bigger picture. Why is everyone afraid or not looking at the mineral streets? What the fuck has been going on in the last 15, 20 years that myself and probably a couple tens of thousands, maybe they all got taken down roads of, you know, conspiracy psyop garbage or something like that. I don't know. Just like they try to do with my channel, you know. They always put Encyclopedia Britannica says these are condensation trails. And these are in videos that I don't say anything in them. So I'm not talking about what I'm telling you now. I'm just doing it, you know, the other way, you know. It's my buddy Ray. All right, so I'm going to turn this back on.
Very curious email by one of my viewers who put this point that in history we would walk, and then we would ride animals, horses being the most obvious, horse and cart, pony and cart, that sort of thing. Then we had the beginnings of a mechanical means of transport, and we eventually had the car. We had steam versions of the car. We now have petrol and diesel and all of that. But because of the rules about electric cars, now that we have the electric car, it will mean that all those historic, apart from horses and carts presumably, the historic petrol, diesel and all of those sort of things, the heritage vehicles, would not be allowed anymore to travel on our roads. Therefore, and of course even steam trains for heritage railways, all of that, it's almost as if history is then stopped because groups that do all this stuff, people who've got their old favourite, whatever, classic car, would not be able to use them. Is that going to be the state of play?
It seems like we are heading in that direction, and I probably need to go on record and say I don't have a problem with electric cars at all. If you would like to drive an electric car and if it works for you, absolutely fine. Where the problems are is in, as you say, it's in the legislation and the framework that is being built around it, and also the subsidies as well. So like I say, you can't take it on face value because it doesn't necessarily make sense for what they're selling it for. But the big push and the legislative push for us to move over to electric seems to be what is getting people's backs up. But as you say, there does seem to be a real deletion of history with us suddenly saying, oh, these cars are all so bad. But look at what these cars have allowed us to achieve. And there are also the state of Wyoming in the USA, which is pretty barren and pretty cold. They've actually now gone the other way, and just in the last few days have started to introduce a bill of legislation to actually ban the sale of electric cars from 2035. They've looked at everything on balance and said, you know what, it's crazy. As a state, they're saying this doesn't work for us. We have a proud history of being, a working state, and a lot of that is built on petrol and gas and the ability to go places. It's very rural, it's very big, it's very cold, and electric doesn't work.
We have 7 years until 2030 for this plan to work, in which so if I've got this right, they're not going to be selling diesel and petrol cars after that point, but presumably if you've got one you can still run it for a while. Is that right?
For now, yes.
For now. I mean, absolutely. Things are, who knows? People are over in a certain Switzerland town at the moment deciding what's the next exciting bits for us to have.
Meteorite, haven't they?
They may well. I read a wonderful book about that. Check out a previous video and you'll hear all about that.
But no, you're absolutely right. So the plan is to stop the production of petrol and diesel cars in 2030. But I'm hearing murmurings from my network that this is already causing problems in, for example, the taxi industry. So a gentleman got in touch with me and says, look, I normally buy my taxis from like an intermediary between the manufacturer and the taxi drivers. And he's saying we're finding it very hard to get the vehicles that we want. The vehicles that they want being economical petrol or diesel, large enough cars that are suitable for taxi use. And he's saying that the knock-on effect of that is that the price of old taxis is climbing. So he gave me a ridiculous example of a driver of his bought a Mercedes, these Mercedes vans, the big comfortable 7-seat, 8, 9-seat things?
Yes.
Right, a driver of his bought one of them, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but it doesn't matter. I think he bought it on 40,000 miles, and let's say he paid 27 grand for it. He then put 200,000 miles on it, and because of what's happening in the market, he sold it for £20,000 profit.
Wow.
So the knock-on effect of this 2030 ban is already being felt, but I don't know if we are starting to move away from the push to electric cars, or if it's just the algorithm presenting me stories that are feeding into what I like to read about. But I am feeling like people are starting to question the true credentials of these electric cars.
I mean, presumably, if a government was very serious about this, and I often question in my videos in a sort of giving the benefit of the doubt to the government, thinking that they must have our best interests at heart, because why wouldn't they? Otherwise, they wouldn't exist. Surely we would have got rid of them if they were evil in any shape or form, one would hope. And so you would think that they must be digging up the roads all over the place. That the infrastructure with charging points everywhere for the convenience of everyone, and new batteries are being manufactured and already stored, and all of this has been thought out. If in 7 years' time they're going to persuade people to get rid of their diesel vehicles or their petrol vehicles, their economic affordable vehicles, shall we say, and then go down this other mechanism, almost, well, mandated to a degree, until the point where you can't get the petrol and all of that's actually stopped at the pump. You kind of think, well, I look out my window and yes, there's roadworks going on, but it might be the gas board or the other sort of electric board, but they're not putting in the installation. And I'm not seeing petrol pumps where you've got bay after bay after bay where you can charge your electric car or swap your electric car for another electric car that will do the next 300 miles or whatever like that. And you just think, well, if they don't start now, when are they going to start?
You're quite right, and I also had another comment drop in my email inbox last night from a gentleman that said there was 1,000 houses being built close to where he lives, and he went and spoke to someone who was involved and asked about, are these houses being put in with electric car chargers? Because you'd think if we're all moving that direction, then surely it should be considered for the build of the house. And the reply came, no, and the system isn't even capable of supporting it, even if we wanted to. So again, it doesn't quite figure, because if everybody tried to switch over to electric tomorrow, well, based on my understanding, the entire grid would collapse. We've already seen in California, for example, we've had moments where they've turned around and said, right, nobody charge your electric car, we haven't got the power for it. So there's a whole load of things that just don't seem to be being considered.
And especially now we're seeing the problem with supply anyway of electricity and gas, with war in Ukraine and problems with energy supply coming from wherever. And you sort of think, well, they're already saying there might be blackouts, and you think, well, hang on a minute, if there might be blackouts, surely if that's going to be a problem, it's not a wise thing to try and push us all down where everything is going to be reliant on electricity. Why can't we have a much longer transition until the electric and the renewable generation of it is so stable and proved to be reliable, and it doesn't matter if the sun goes in or the wind doesn't blow, that we can still generate enough, whether that be with a little extra help from nuclear or whatever it is. That's what it seems to me. It's bonkers to be trying to push everything into this one size fits all, when clearly not only domestically but industrially, how the hell, I mean, it just seems anybody can think of this for more than 2 minutes. You'll start going, how does this work? Surely this is a nutty scheme.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Some of the comments that popped up on my Royal Mail video were saying that Amazon had opened a depot and they wanted it to be, zero emission and all this stuff, so they bought all the electric vans, which were backed up by diesel generations at the base to power the electric vans. And then this gentleman who contacted me said, well, in the morning I had a parcel arrive in an Amazon electric van, and then in the afternoon the rest of my delivery arrived in a unbranded, rented diesel, because the electric vans weren't good enough to do the full round. So with the businesses as well, this isn't just on the consumer.
6,800, 6,500, something like that. It was pretty much up there.
Are going out and buying these vehicles and finding that they just don't work in the real world. I'm not saying that they don't work for everybody. There will be people who, maybe they've been given the car as part of a company scheme, so the cost of the vehicle is negated, and maybe they charge it at home and they do 15 miles to work, and that's the perfect vehicle for them, and that's brilliant. But for the vast majority of human beings who own a car, an electric car isn't actually a viable replacement.
Yeah, no, it does seem as if this has been dreamed up by a man who only goes 5 minutes down the road and is more thinking of the old Sinclair C5 and that sort of thing, rather than actually a practical implication for the rest of the world.
Sorry,
no, go on.
Just while you're on the Sinclair C5, I think that's a really good point that you've brought up, because the Sinclair C5 was about cheap transport for the masses, whereas what we're seeing in the electric car world is we're not seeing cheap, lightweight, easy transport that makes transport accessible for people. We're seeing giant 3-ton SUVs that are £90,000 and more, that seem to be more about status and your Instagram than actually about saving the planet or going places frugally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so then you move on to this sort of, again, another nutty concept that seems to be being forced on us, that people haven't voted for, which is a continual thing. Things that we have not actually been consulted or voted for. These so-called 15-minute cities, in which they want to try and contain the number of journeys that you make in and around a city in the words that they use to control traffic and reduce emissions and all of this sort of stuff. I don't know whether it makes a difference in the way they go and charge you, whether you're driving an electric car or a fossil fuel-based car. Do you know whether there would be an exemption if so in other words, if you're limited to 100 journeys, if you cross over certain zones as it's been described, if you're in an electric car, you should, pardon? Checkpoints. Well, they would be. I mean, they've got to check, haven't they? Surely there'll be a man with a barrier, won't there, with a peak cap, who's going to be very polite. Oh, hello, sir. Can I just check? If you do 100 journeys, just have a look at your card. Oh, yes, I see you've done 99 journeys. Just one more journey, sir, then I'm afraid I will have to be rather officious next time.
But if you 100 journeys per family, not per vehicle or per person.
Well, this is it. There's so many sort of weird connotations, because presumably, unless they can identify the driver, it's going to be the car and then the keeper of the car who gets clobbered, which is very unfair if that happens to be, say, a disabled person and they have a chauffeur who's doing the journeys and then has to get home at night and takes the car because the disabled person can't drive, so he doesn't really need it, but he's employing the other bloke. But anyway, all of that. But if you have an electric car, do they get any preferential treatment?
I'm not aware that they do. Again, there's another one of those things where we seem to be moving in one direction, but not necessarily all joined up. So as far as I'm aware, if you own an electric car, these 15-minute neighbourhood low traffic zones, you're not allowed through, emissions or not. So I think when you did your video on these low traffic 15-minute neighbourhoods, you used the word insidious, and I think I have to completely agree. There's far too much within those 15-minute neighbourhoods that seems more like unnecessary restrictions. And when I did my video on it, I questioned, why should anybody else judge whether your journey is unnecessary? How can you, to have a government body or some sort of think tank who are sitting there to work out, well, what journeys are necessary and what journeys are unnecessary, so we can work out whether you're allowed to go on your journey. I find that quite terrifying.
Yes, that anybody can make the decision for you of what is important to you at any one time. And would you get an exemption if it was an emergency and your hospital is across the zone? You've done your 100. You've been a good boy. You've done all that. You go, I can't drive now for another 2 weeks until the end of this year. And then mother's taken ill. It's taking 5 to 10 hours or 10 days for an ambulance to come, and you're thinking, sod this, I'm going to put her in the car. So you save the taxpayer the cost of the ambulance, but you get penalised for going across. And could you then go, wait, hang on a minute, it's this? Or if you're chasing somebody who's just stolen your precious colour television or whatever it is, and you're going, I'm going to catch you, and you slip. You know, there must be so many things. It'd just be a nightmare for administration, I would think, for their end.
Absolutely, so many questions, and you know, you mentioned earlier on about consultations, and I dug fairly deeply into the consultation on the Oxford traffic filter scheme, and I looked in some depth at the responses that people were saying to it, and it was all very, very vague. There were not many people that were saying this scheme makes sense for starters. It is fantastic, and we want it, and yet here we are. You know, they're introducing it. The traffic filters are starting to go up, and seems to me like another ignored consultation where the public were either deliberately misled, deliberately confused, or just ignored completely.
So on your channel, tell me a bit about channel. Let's give you some, so anybody watching mine will know what to do. What do you normally do?
Normally, I make accessible, fun car videos for people. So prior to dipping my toes into explaining stuff, which my videos lately seem to be more me explaining things to people, I would buy a car and I would do a review on it, and I would have a little bit of fun and then try and sell it for a small profit and make a video about it. It was as simple as that, and I would do fun things like I bought a 7-seater and I thought, well, how fast can I sit in every one of these 7 seats? But every car that I bought it became an adventure in one way or another. So I'd buy a car from Timbuktu, jump on a train, take my skateboard with me, and then film the whole journey and then meet the person that bought the car. That was the original concept, but not too much unlike yourself. Of late, I find myself making slightly more controversial videos because I want to protect the freedom that I enjoy, and the freedom that I enjoy is going on road trips, basically. I like
Aim this camera over here, though.
up and down this country, over through Europe. I want to be able to do that.
Something like
And all I see around me at the moment is threats to that thing that I enjoy. So it's not like my car videos are on hold at the minute. It's just that there's bigger fish to fry if I want to keep making the car videos.
And we've had cars now for 100 years. You know, you think of the London to Brighton rally, which is what the highlight, I suppose, in this country, celebrating all those classic cars. Presumably, with the low carbon business, that would have to halt, or you'd have to have a very special exemption, presumably, to allow that to happen, which would, you know, it would just make it just smell funny about it. Although I'm sure they smell funny anyway because they're old-fashioned cars, which is